Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
Michael McDuff, Executive Director of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
Promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. My 35-year friend, Michael McDuff, Executive Director of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors, joins us. Buddy, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Always a pleasure to be with you. Let's talk about the Contractors Licensing Board, the mission specifically. You were on the show a year or so ago, but remind our viewers what the Contractors Licensing Board is all about.
And Tim, as you know, the State Licensing Board for Contractors, it was created by the legislature over 60 years ago in 1956, but the creation of the Licensing Board for Contractors was a consumer protection to protect the public, but also the integrity of the construction industry. The leaders of the construction industry back 60 years ago knew the same thing, that they needed to do a better job to regulate their industry and to protect the integrity of their industry, but also for the public. So that's the brief mission for the State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're
going to talk about the work you guys do to prevent and respond to fraud a little bit later in the show, but let's talk about your board. The Contractors Licensing Board is just that, and it's made up of individuals from the construction industry generally. Talk about your leadership, how the members are selected, that sort of thing.
The Licensing Board for Contractors, it's appointed by the governor, but the nominees that go to the governor's office, the nominees come from major construction trade organizations, Associated General Contractors, Associated Builders and Contractors, the electrical, the mechanical, the oil field contractors. So leaders from all sectors in the construction industry make their nominations to the governor's office, and then the governor makes the appointments for these folks to serve. And it's not a paid job. These are people that volunteer their expertise and their time to better protect the public and to help the industry.
Make sure the contractors are doing the right things. And that sort of leads me to my next question, and that is, you know, most of the folks who are contractors in our state, most of the folks who are contractors in the United States are good actors. They do the right thing. Absolutely. But in every line of work, there are the bad actors, right? The bad apples. And so you have to focus on making sure that you weed those folks out in any way you can, because they can damage the reputation of the individuals who are trying to do it right. So you mentioned the mission, but let's talk about why licensure is so important. I mean, I know there are those who say we shouldn't do it, just let the market take care of it. But it really does protect the public and protect contractors who are doing the right thing.
Absolutely. And the real issue with licensing is to measure competency. The state of Louisiana, we only license companies. We do not license individuals, but companies that are doing business in the construction industry. So the need and the importance of licensing is to measure competency before issuing a license to do business in Louisiana. And as you know, we've seen so many good things in the industry, leaders from the state of Louisiana, that as it relates to safety and craft training across the country and across the world, that you and I as young people, we've been able to witness the great things. But there are so many on the other side that I have seen
shady
as a
right?
regulator. So I've seen all of that. But the licensing is to protect the consumers through licensing, to make sure that there is a competency and ability to do business in Louisiana.
Well, let's talk about measuring and testing for that competency. Obviously, if I'm an individual who is in the construction business or who desires to get into the construction business, and I am located in Louisiana, headquartered here, or doing business here, I need to come to your board and go through the process to get a contractor's license. Walk us through that process, Michael. I know there are thresholds that are critically important in terms of the business that you're doing, but if I want to get licensed, what do I have to do?
To be a licensed contractor in Louisiana, to make an application, to be tested. If you're applying in the commercial sector, the threshold for licensing is anything over $50,000, and that is labor and materials. And that's for all crafts, whether it be industrial, commercial. But in the field of electrical and mechanical and plumbing, that threshold has lowered to $10,000 because those fields, there needs to be more of a measurement of competency for small businesses in those fields. So when you make the application, fill out the application, we've made great strides to try and simplify and streamline. We do not want to be over-regulated. But one important thing is to make sure that you're registered to do business in the state of Louisiana, to pay taxes, just like all other businesses. And we do a financial background check, is to make sure that that company, its officers or members, that there's no liens or judgments, because that is a problem throughout all
Red
industry.
flag, so to speak.
Absolutely, that they have to take care of that before consideration to approve the license.
And you have to demonstrate some level of competency as well. There are tests that you must take. Talk about those tests a little bit.
The trade examinations are intended to measure the competency. Our pass-fail ratio is just over 70%, which is good. Other states have a much lower pass-fail ratio. But the examinations, we have over 60 examinations, whether you're a commercial contractor for building construction, in residential licensing. I need to mention that the threshold for residential is to build a home, anything over $75,000 for licensing. But there's home improvement registration at a lower threshold. But the trade examination, they take the examination, and our business and law is basically information on bidding, bonding, capacity, estimating, and project management.
So you have to prove that you understand the specific area of construction that you're going into, but you also have to prove that you understand the business aspects, because quite frankly, that's where more folks, I would suspect, get in trouble. Most folks who go into it have a skill, they have an ability, they have a craft, but they've got to understand the business aspect of what you do as well.
Absolutely.
Got about a minute left in the segment, so just quickly, and we may have to take this over, but you've been elected president of the National Association of State Contractors Licensing Agencies, an organization called NASCLA. Talk briefly about that, the role it plays, and what it means to have you as the Louisiana representative being president.
NASCLA is all the other contractor licensing agencies, and it's very important that we network with other licensing agencies, what their processes and procedures are. But my main goal with NASCLA is to simplify and to make sure that we're not getting over-regulatory, because our contractors from Louisiana that work all across the nation, they constantly have problems with that process, and to simplify the licensing is very important.
Done a lot of work in the state of California in my consulting firm, and I know how over-regulation can look. We'll take a break, but come back. I want to talk a little bit about fraud and what you're doing to root that out. We're visiting with Michael McDuff. He's the Executive Director of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Spadel's Florist was founded over 30 years ago. From my mom's kitchen, we have grown into one of the largest florists in this area. There's a sense in our community that you stick together. Good times or bad. And oil and gas is part of that family. They're my neighbors. They're my customers. They're the person I'm sitting next to at church. If oil and gas is doing well, all of our businesses are doing well. We are Louisiana Oil and Gas.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value. What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools, and that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you? Build your future at byf.org.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Michael McDuff, Executive Director of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors, is our guest. Now, we talked a lot about the mission of the Contractors Licensing Board, and obviously good actors out there, bad actors out there, not any different than any line of work. But it seems like, at least to me, Michael, that we've seen, as a result of the 2016 floods, maybe a little bit more devious activity, a little more fraud being perpetrated on the public out there. I know you guys are on top of it, you're working it, but let's talk about what we've seen in terms of increased fraud activity since the floods.
And it's a real issue. It's a real threat, not just Louisiana, across the country, the contractor fraud, particularly in the residential sector, because consumers that are most vulnerable are in the residential sector, and unfortunately the elder that are scammed. Since post-Katrina, after Katrina, we had the same issue in Louisiana, a lot of fraudulent actions. The State Licensing Board for Contractors would investigate and try to address the issues with contractor fraud. Since the flood of 2016, we're seeing a lot of that, but the positive part of that is law enforcement. We partner with our Attorney General's office, we partner with the district attorneys and local law enforcement. A lot of the media attention that we see of contractor fraud, that's where our local law enforcement has really stepped in and is doing a great job to investigate and to try to clean up the problem. And it is a problem in the industry, but the real concern is post events like that. You will have the scammers, but we constantly try to remind the public, pay attention, verify the license. We have a website and a mobile app that's very easy. If you go to lacontractor.org, the consumers can verify the licensure very quickly.
You know, we talk about increased activity because we see more of it in the media, but the good news is, I mean, we joke about politics in Louisiana and the culture of corruption maybe, and I say all the time is, yeah, Louisiana has some political corruption, but I'll tell you what we do, we put them in jail.
Absolutely.
And so when we see it in the media, the good news is we're seeing the results of the work that you do and that local law enforcement does to weed these folks out and capture them. So that's really a positive thing when we see it, right?
And the consumers that have been scammed, it's so unfortunate. People that are desperate to get back in their homes. One of the reminders of Governor John Bell Edwards, when the rebuilding of homes, he constantly reminded the public, be patient, do not get over
aggressive, right?
Aggressive, because you make mistakes, and the consumers that had someone knock on their door and assured them that they could do it faster, cheaper than anyone else, and they did not verify the license or check references, that's where the consumers have been hurt.
A lot of your ads talk about if a deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. Let's talk about some of the specific things you guys have found, some of the specific frauds that might be perpetrated.
And again, most of these come from out of state, that they watch when different storms, tornadoes, or floods happen, and they see that as an opportunity, so they show up. And it's very easy to look where the license plates are from, when the person who knocks on your door does not have anything more than a business card and a cell phone number. That's indicative of they're not in business. They're there just to take advantage of the consumer. So that's where the consumers have to be very diligent to find out, are they legitimate, and to check references.
One of the things I've seen is that a lot of these elderly folks are putting these deposits down for folks before work ever begins, before anything's ever been done, before they've checked references. Oftentimes that's when they get in trouble.
And never, we have on our website, we have the tips for the consumers. Never pay up front, never pay cash. Write the checks to the name of the business that they're licensed to do business in, and sometimes you need to co-sign these checks to make sure that they're not taking that money and running, and that's very often.
So once you identify fraud like that, let's talk about the process that you go through and the penalties that are the potential penalties that exist.
When the complaints come in to the office of the Contractors for Licensing Board, we investigate the complaints to verify, is it a valid complaint, to make sure it's not a personal or civil issue, which that happens. To then, when the investigation is completed and the cases are brought to the Licensing Board for Contractors, for the violation of licensing, the fines are not the primary goal. The primary goal is to get them legal and licensed. And if the unlicensed contractors are cooperative and comply with the law to apply, we're not intended to try and hurt them. But if they're going to do business in Louisiana, they have to be made sure that they're competent and able to do business.
So if I'm caught and it's obvious that I've perpetrated a fraud on the consumer in Louisiana, there are some pretty stiff penalties that go along with that. Talk a little bit about some of the penalties that you guys might met out.
In the commercial sector, it could be up to 3% of the contract value. Unfortunately, a lot of the violations of law, there is no contract, there's a handshake. And we try to remind people, make sure you have a written contract, very specific. But for the violation where it's determined that it is a violation of law, it could be 3% of the contract value. And that fine, if levied, could be significant.
Does it go all the way up to potential jail time? I mean, how significant can it get?
That's the positive, where we're seeing local law enforcement and our district attorneys that they are making arrests. We have no arrest powers, but if the Licensing Board for Contractors completes its investigation, brings it for administrative hearing, then in the local parish, if that district attorney wants to go after these folks, and they are, which we love to see, then they can do jail time.
It could be that significant. We'll take a break. We come back. I want to talk about sort of what's on the horizon for the State Licensing Board for Contractors. I want to talk about some of the educational programs you guys are engaged with, and I want to talk about the contractor community in Louisiana in general. You've got great experience there. We're visiting with Michael McDuff. He's the Executive Director of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
What if I said that the American dream is alive and well, and that it exists for anyone willing to build it? That the power of a nation does not reside in its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of those who built them? And that the country's greatest heroes also wear hard hats. In today's America, it's not enough to dream about the future. You have to build it. Build your future at byf.org.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Michael McDuff with the State Licensing Board for Contractors is our guest. We were joking during the break. 1985, you went to work for the Associated Builders and Contractors. I came there in 1994. You were my boss there for a while, and I loved working with you. But we've had this conversation so many times. Louisiana is blessed with so much great construction contractor talent, specifically in the commercial and industrial realm. And you and I have had the great pleasure of having a lot of those leaders as our mentors. Talk about what that means from an economic development perspective, from an ability to get work perspective, your experience with this wonderful contracting community in Louisiana.
And you know, Tim, we were both young men, and we had the opportunity to work with major contractors that when it came to making decisions and to moving forward to help the industry on safety and craft training, we watched as things took place that these men and women in the construction industry, they put their talent and their efforts forward, and on both a state level, national, and worldwide, that when it came to benefiting the industry, for their client base, but also for the consumers, great things happen. And one of the ones you're still involved today with the National Center for Construction Education and Research. NCCER.
Great sponsors of this show, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely, and those were local contractors that were the leaders, and still are, that participate. That's one of the great things about the industry that we have seen, that not waiting for the government or somebody else to come solve their problems. This was the industry that said we need to move forward, and that was great.
You mentioned the NCCER and local involvement. Eddie Risponi, former past chairman of NCCER, Jerry Risponi of ISC, Andy Dupuy, CEO of Brown and Root, another sponsor of this show, will actually be chairman of the NCCER Board of Trustees this year, as a matter of, or next year, as a matter of fact. So a lot of great involvement there. The Contractors Licensing Board also has some great relationships. You talked about NCCER, and you guys have had a relationship there, but Louisiana Economic Development, the Louisiana Community and Technical College System. Talk about those partnerships, Michael.
The great partnership we have with Economic Development and LCTCS is on contractor accreditation, and this was initiated by LED, how to help small businesses to become a contractor in Louisiana. There are a lot of similar initiatives that DOTD and other agencies have, but this partnership with LED and LCTCS has in the past year really for small businesses and those that want to learn on estimating, project management, bonding, and what it takes to be in business and how to help them become licensed, but to become a contractor. That's a great initiative, and I applaud LED and LCTCS, because they're the leaders with this.
Well, our good friends Don Pearson at LED and Monty Sullivan at LCTCS doing great work there as well. There are other great initiatives going on at the Contractors Licensing Board. You guys are doing a lot. You mentioned in education some things that are happening there. Talk about sort of where the Contractors Licensing Board is going, and so your vision of the things you'd still like to accomplish.
You know, as I mentioned earlier, one of the prime objectives with the licensing board is to make sure that we offer the tools that are there for businesses not to become burdensome for the licensing. What the NCCR does all over the world, the tool sets for those people and companies that need to raise the bar of professionalism in the industry. And so that's what the Contractors Licensing Board is about, how we can offer and to simplify the tools that are available by NCCR, by other trade organizations, so that they can become capable to continue to do their work.
Two things that are critically important for any business to expand, right, is certainty around regulation and taxation, obviously, and then opportunity through education and improvement, and you are offering both of those. You talked about overregulation a number of times, and it's critically important that we think about that. There's a fine line out there, Absolutely. I think, between protecting the consumer and regulating the business, right? And you guys walk that pretty well. Talk a little bit about how you balance those two.
Well, and you know, as the chairman of the National Contractor Licensing Agencies, different states have different statutes and laws and rules, but for our contractors that work all across the country, we hear it very often that it is so burdensome and it should not be overly difficult. The term of reciprocity that is to reciprocate with those states for a contractor that has met all requirements by law, let's not make it a barrier because that in this day and time as a regulatory body, we have to check ourselves and evaluate our processes. And with our office, we are ongoing. How can we simplify? We've done a lot of things to streamline in the computer technical world to make it as simple as possible with licensing.
A little less than a minute left, but that whole idea of reciprocity, so a licensed contractor in Louisiana can go to California or can go to Alabama and vice versa. One of your real goals as a leader of NASCLA this year, right?
Absolutely, because again, the term of free enterprise, you and I, as we grew up with associated builders and contractors, we want free and open competition for out-of-state contractors coming to Louisiana. We have no problems as long as they are capable, as long as they are registered with the state. We want them and we welcome them to do business in Louisiana. But we need to make sure that we're not putting barriers against that.
15 seconds left. If someone wants more information on the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors, what do they do?
Please go to our website, lacontractor.org, and all of that information is there for you.
Michael McDuff, my buddy, Executive Director, Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. Always a pleasure to speak to you, man.
Good to see you.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.